Perfect. Welcome, everyone. We are super excited for today's Sound Bites. This is the first Sound Bite session of our academic year. And so we just want to welcome everyone. This is going to be a really exciting workshop. We have some collaboration here across campuses with Daytona Beach. So we're really excited to welcome Dr. Amy Cicchino here with us today. But just briefly, if you are new to the Sound Bites series, we wanted to introduce Vector. We are the virtual environment for communication, teaching outreach, and research. We are with Embry-Riddle's worldwide campus, and we support Embry-Riddle students as well as faculty in all things communication. So when we think about written, spoken, visual, and digital, that's our definition of communication because we'd like to think of this as broadly as we can. I am joined by Vector's co-director, Dr. Megan Velez, and I am going to turn things over to Megan to share more about Vector's three-pillar structure and Sound Bites.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see all of you. Can't believe it's the end of October and we're having our very first Sound Bites teaching workshop. So thank you for joining us. As Alex mentioned, we have three pillars of Vector that we use to support our mission. The first is the student pillar, the virtual communication lab, where we offer tutoring as well as workshops and online resources for all Embry-Riddle students on any communication related task that they might be working on. We've got a couple of excellent VCL tutors in the room with us today. So we want to thank you for your work supporting our students. And we also have our teaching pillar, which consists of these Sound Bites workshops, as well as a Vector faculty resources site in Canvas, where we share a variety of resources related to teaching communication across disciplines. And then finally, Vector serves as a space for communication research to thrive, and we do that through our research pillar activities. And you can see some of those on that Vector faculty resources site as well. If you're not currently added to that site, just pop your email address into the chat and we would be happy to add you today. These Sound Bites workshops are the main tenet right now of our teaching pillar, and these are just 30-minute workshops that are aimed at providing bite-sized sound pedagogical strategies that all faculty can use regardless of discipline to improve their teaching. So we see these as sort of conversation starters, and you can always access additional resources and continue that conversation in the faculty resources site that I just mentioned. And without further ado, we're going to turn things over to Dr. Amy Cicchino from the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence on the Daytona Beach campus, who will be talking with us about reflection in partnership with the QEP. Take it away, Amy.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to go ahead and get my Zoom situation handled. So yes, today we're talking about reflection. And I do want to remind you, Megan and Alex did such a great job, I think, situating this as a workshop. It is a workshop, it's not a presentation. So I'm going to ask you to be a little active today. And if you're in an environment where you can write and think and share, I encourage you to please do so. Please use the spaces you need. So you're welcome to have your camera on or off, whatever suits you best. And if you'd like to contribute to the conversation, feel free to unmute, or if you'd rather use the chat or DM, myself or Alex or Megan, we're happy to share for you as well. So to access the materials for today's workshop, you're going to go ahead and visit a bit.ly link called Vector Reflects. And what this will take you to is just a shared drive where you can have a copy of the slides that you're seeing, some assignment examples, and a workshop handout. And if you want to download a copy of this, this can kind of be your space for thinking today. It can be a nice takeaway summary of the workshop as well. So to do that, you'll just go to File, Save As, and you'll download a copy for yourself. So I'll give everyone just a minute or two to go ahead and locate those materials. Oh, and they're also posted on the Vector Canvas site for you. So we're going to start by practicing some different forms of reflection, and then we'll talk a little bit about reflection and how you might bring reflection into your courses. And then we'll end by talking about how to give feedback and how to evaluate reflection. And so a lot to do in our 30 minutes, maybe a little ambitious, but I'm excited to work with you on it. So we know that Riddle and Vector thinks writing matters. And so I'm going to start by having you write a little bit. Feel free again to use that handout or a piece of scratch paper or a note on your phone, whatever's handy. But I'm going to have you write about a few different scenarios. And so here's the first. Write about a change that you've made this semester to help your students succeed. And particularly, I'm curious to know what cues helped you identify that your students needed more support. What adjustments did you make? And how did you assess if your changes were effective? I'm going to mute myself and give you just about a minute and a half to jot down your thoughts. We'll take about 10 more seconds. Okay, so I'm going to move you on to another prompt. So now I want you to think about a course that you taught last semester, maybe a course you taught last year, that you feel could have been better. So what concepts did your students struggle with? How do you know? What adjustments could you make next time you teach this course? Or maybe you've already made them, you're teaching those changes now. And then how are you going to reevaluate these changes? Again, I'll give you about a minute or 2 minutes to just collect your thoughts. We'll take about 10 more seconds. Okay, so we just practiced a couple of different kinds of reflection. So first, we did reflection in action. So we thought about something that we experienced, we perceived or felt that something was going wrong or could be improved in our class. We paused to reflect, and then we thought about some deliberate or intentional actions that we could take based on that reflection, right? We reflected while also acting. But then we also looked back. on a past experience. So we reflected on our action. From reflecting back, we are likely to do things different or see things in different ways because we've learned from that experience. And so these are two really valuable reflective abilities that we can support with our students, but we're actually going to practice one more. See, sorry, I'm going to make you do one more thing. And that's reflect in presentation. And so this is your final one, and this is the one we're going to talk about. And so you're welcome to write, but you're also welcome to collect your ideas in the chat or unmute and share aloud. But I want to know how you would describe the teaching experiences that you just wrote about in your annual evaluation document, or if you were putting together an application for a teaching position. So how would it be different than the first two types of reflection that you did? How would that audience and that context change how you reflected? And how would you consider the choices that you wanted to make as a communicator in that moment? So I want to pause and just invite you to share.
Amy, you said we can share verbally?
You
Okay.
can.
Awesome. Well, I think it shows security and emotional intelligence for a person to be upfront and share their vulnerabilities. You know, what did I learn? What did I do wrong? It's maybe not wrong, but what did I improve? What do I identify and improve upon, and make myself, you know, a lifelong learner in that sense.
Yeah, Jeff. So I really want to highlight one thing that you said, right? Maybe in the first two reflections, we were a little more comfortable with failure, right? Something went wrong. I got a lot of questions. And I appreciated how in this third reflection, you framed it as I'm a lifelong learner. And because I'm a lifelong learner, I have this positive professional quality I can improve from these experiences. So that's great. Why did you choose to frame it in a positive professional way in this third one?
Well, you said I was applying for something that I wanted. So if I'm going to be ambitious and achieve, I'm going to frame it that in a context of yes, I can. And yes, I have a positive approach and I can accomplish things and overcome challenges.
Yeah, and that's a message your audience, a hiring committee, is probably going to be a little more eager to hear, right? That's wonderful.
Not that I'm
Thank
applying
you.
for a job.
No, of course not. Of course not. Maybe a teaching award. We'll say it like that. Does anyone else want to share?
I'll go. Why not? If I were doing this in my annual evaluation, I certainly would share the challenge, but then I would emphasize my willingness to adapt and learn from the students, and kind of similar to what Jeff was saying, and then maybe like highlight the strengths that I have on pulling on my, training in order to do that.
Yeah, I think that's great. So again, highlight that professional skill responsiveness. Cheryl in the chat wrote, assess the need for the change, whether it's real or imagined. Janice said, give an overview of my experiences and what I learned from them. I really love that point, Janice, right? Like the way you organize your thoughts is going to be different, where you might have a lot of questions in those first reflections. In this third one, we're going to start with this overview. We're going to put us in the moment, and then we're going to maybe step back and talk about what we learned from this experience. That's great. Does anyone else want to share? Okay, I'm going to move us ahead. So yes, reflection is really important. And I imagine a lot of you practice reflection already. It's probably something you've internally learned because you're thoughtful people and because reflection is really valued in what we do. But it's likely pretty new to our students. And for our students, prompting them to reflect is going to help them make connections across different learning experiences. It's going to help them kind of make sense at how they tell the larger story of who they are, why they're here, what they've learned. And we hope that it's also going to help them really order and communicate more effectively. So this quote by Brett Einon comes out of the Catalyst Connect to Learning project. They assembled 24 institutions to do e-portfolio projects and study reflection. And he found that across a number of student groups, reflection was beneficial in increasing motivation and persistence and success. And so that's another reason we want to do it. But the research says our students aren't necessarily great at reflecting without our help. And so it's important that we have really intentional and timely practice, that we do it again and again, that we help them use their reflection to interact with others, and that we really come from a place of inquiry, wanting to know about them, and integration, wanting to help them connect, and really telling their story. So being learner-centered in our reflection. And so within the context of the QEP specifically, we want our students to reflect on how they write and how they tailor their communication for different contexts and different audiences and different purposes. So exactly what we just did in that opening activity. We also want them to know that communication comes in different formats or genres, and we want them to be aware of the different writing moves they're going to have to make as they write in those different genres. And so when we think about excellent reflection within the QEP, we want students to really talk about the choices that they made and how those choices connect to their audience, their context, or their purpose. We want them to really think about their writing process. We want them to think about rhetorical concepts like audience, purpose, context, genre, and medium in their writing content. So that comes back, I think, to Jeff and Lindsay's points about framing these questions, this potential area of struggle or failure in the classroom as a positive professional skill, because we know our audience is going to value that. We want them to think about those rhetorical concepts also in their delivery. So that comes back to Janice's point about how we organize our ideas. And then finally, we want them to demonstrate an awareness of how we communicate in different professional or industry communities or in their disciplines. And so how do we do this work? How do we support them? We really have a lot of options here. So we can use informal reflection activities to get them to slow down, think, and express their thoughts and ideas. We can do that without judgment, so without high stakes evaluation, or we can use more formal reflection activities. And in those cases, we're going to ask students to think and refine their thoughts and maybe communicate with intentionality to a specific audience or a specific context. And so I'd love for us to take a look at some examples of reflective assignments. These are all in the folder, but I'm also going to share them on the screen. And so as we look at them, I'd love to know what you notice about how reflection is supporting learning in this example. And then also maybe what you would want to change or modify if you wanted to bring this kind of reflection into your course. So our first example is an assignment wrapper. And so this assignment wrapper actually gets paired with an assignment that already exists in your classroom. So maybe it's a project, maybe it's a presentation, maybe it's a high stakes exam. But students complete this reflection activity where they talk about their process, their choices, and they self-assess their performance. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to read through the reflective questions. And I'm also going to go ahead and just reshare the link to the folder. Okay, so what do you all notice about the reflection assignment wrapper? And what would you maybe have to change or do differently if you wanted to use it in your course? So Rebecca says it's similar to a debrief practice in aviation operations. Oh yeah, I love framing it in that way. Rebecca, can you tell us more about that debrief practice?
Sure, yeah. Hi, and Becky, please. I haven't changed the name on there yet, and I apologize. I had a Zoom issue, so I was jumping in and out. Yeah, I mean, just flying this past weekend, you get to the end of a flight and you turn to the person you're flying with and say, let's debrief. Let's talk about what went well, how we felt about it, all those things. So to me, this is very similar in a lot of ways to that. And I think maybe even depending on what class I was teaching, I might frame it as debrief instead of reflection, because that word might be a little more comfortable and familiar, depending on the class. So.
Such a great point. Lindsay says, yes, similarly, engineers use an after action review. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, in all these cases, we don't expect things to go perfectly. It's an opportunity to take stock, take a moment and process what we've experienced and think about how we can intentionally move forward to improve our practices. And so again, this could just be added on to an assignment that you already have. Okay, so our next example is a formal letter that comes out of Caitlin Martin's class, Dr. Martin's class. So in this case, students are writing a letter to readers, and they're going to really reflect on how their portfolio shows their understanding of good writing and how it connects to their personal or professional goals. And I'm actually going to go up here to give you a moment just to review that. So what do you notice about this assignment? And what would you maybe have to change or modify if you wanted to do some sort of a letter in your course?
I'll jump in on this one, just to make a note that in English 123 that Megan and I recently redeveloped, we asked students to reflect in a letter. And one of the first things I realized is that students no longer know how to write letters. And so having something like this minimum expectations would be extremely helpful for us to add. And it did make Sherry Markham and I, Marcham, decide on developing a mini course. And we had already been developing one on APA, but we're now doing one on professional business communication. And in it, it's just basically how to write letters and memos and things of that nature. And so that's the one thing I learned from, teaching them reflection is one thing, but having to, show them how to write a letter was something I really didn't expect, but it makes sense.
That is such a good point, right? And that comes back to that idea of format or genre, right? Our students might not know these different formats of communication. And so framing them in that way, whether it's here's a letter or here's a debrief that we do after ideation operations, and teaching them what it means to do those formats well, that's an important part of it. Thanks for contributing that, Anne-Marie. And you're getting a lot of love in the chat for your contribution there. So the final example I want to show you are just informal quick writes. And so this is an open access business communication textbook that I use in my courses. And so at the end of each section, we just get some reflective questions. And so you could have your students respond to these brief prompts after modules or after readings as a way to just pause and reflect on the content. I also do want to share some reflection resources that were developed by the ePortfolio Pedagogy Subcommittee. So Sandra Branham, Maria Petrusco, Taylor Mitchell, Ramona White. And so what you'll find on that link is just a whole host of reflective activities, including videos, quizzes, assignments. And so if you're looking for inspiration, I think that's another really great resource to share as you're designing courses or talking to your colleagues about reflection. So I know that we are tight on time, and so I'm not going to share the QEP example, but I will say there are examples and examples with annotations in that workshop folder that I shared with you at the beginning of the workshop, and we'll make sure to share that again in the next couple of minutes. So I want to end by just talking about how we evaluate and how we assess reflection. I know a lot of the faculty I work with here on the Daytona Beach campus, they get a little nervous to assign new writing assignments in their courses because they think that there's always a lot of labor tied to writing, especially when it comes to giving feedback and evaluating. And so it doesn't have to be that way with all forms of reflection, especially these informal kinds of reflections. And so if you're doing informal reflective prompts, you could grade that as complete or incomplete, right? Did the students make an honest attempt to answer each parts of the reflective prompt? If so, then it's complete and we move on. I think with those more formal kinds of reflection, feedback is important. But to Anne-Marie's point, that feedback doesn't have to happen at the end. So it doesn't have to be you marking everything in SpeedGrader. It could be you creating a module or creating a scaffolding activity where you ask them if they know what a letter is, and you maybe have them watch a short video describing what a letter is, what it does, the successful criteria of one, and then maybe they outline their letter. And so that feedback can be created systematically to balance out the labor. We can also leverage peer review so that students are giving each other feedback, or students are using a spec sheet to give some large scale feedback. And so I really want to encourage you not to be intimidated by writing feedback and have that be a barrier to bringing reflection into your class, because it can be as low stakes and low labor as you'd like it to be, or it can be detailed and intensive if you'd like it to be that as well. Okay, and so I know that we're at time, so I'd love to maybe just stop now and ask if there are any reflection related questions or QEP related questions, given some of the folks that we have in the room.
Hey, I will just kind of bring up real quick that I love the AAR and debrief type of language put to it. And I'll mention it's not just for aviation or aeronautics. Any of our military students will respond really quickly to that. Regardless of field of study, if they hear debrief or AAR, they will know exactly what that is. It will feel warm and friendly to them. And also in that context, when we talk about how intensive it can be, oftentimes some of these can be framed in very concise writing, because I know on the military side, oftentimes that's what it is. You do want it to be professional, but it's very concise. So there's not a lot of time because in a military environment, your AARs are happening very quickly. So I think sometimes on the academic side, our students feel there needs to be fluff because they're looking for word counts or something. But I kind of like that angle, and that there's an option to take that, because I think our students, will feel better to them. They know this isn't going to take another 2 hours of writing for all of these. It can be short, concise, direct, and something they feel familiar with. So that's, I like that part of it a lot.
Thank you for sharing that, Linda. You're getting a lot of nods, a lot of reactions, and some good affirmation in the chat. I think you're right. Linking this to something that our students are familiar with and they see value in is really important. And then talking to them transparently about what you want them to learn from this reflective piece. I know when we talk about reflection in my course, I tell my students, I'm not looking for polished writing. I'm not paying attention to commas. Like I really just care about your honest description of your experience and what you've learned. And so anytime you can help students understand what you're looking for in those moments, I think that's a great teaching practice. So thank you for that.
Oh, just a quick question. Not necessarily related to reflection, but getting back to where the commas go and all those kinds of things. Relatively new to Embry-Riddle, so can I maybe offline set up a meeting with someone from Vector to better understand, like how can I best communicate to our adjuncts how Vector can be recommended to students to assist with writing, and that what's the best messaging and what are the best options. So I'll throw my email in the chat too, but would love to connect on some of that.
Becky, we will absolutely reach out to you.
Thank you.
Happy to help with that. Well, I know we're a couple of minutes over time. If anyone wants to stay and hang out and ask any additional questions, Alex and I and Amy too can hang out for a couple more minutes. We do want to thank Dr. Cicchino for her amazing workshop leadership today and for the amazing resources that she shared. Again, this is just the start of an excellent conversation on reflection. So we are so happy that y'all joined us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.